our Career Success event. This is a series of events where design mentors come together to provide tips and insights into the how-tos and what should I do's of navigating a successful career. And tonight, this afternoon, this morning, we're excited to focus on the ins and outs, the ups and downs of design critiques. First, let me introduce myself and then tell you a little bit about our community. I can navigate this, my goodness, every time. All right, make sure I present. Technical difficulties, am I right? There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Ying Yao. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a senior UX designer at Honeywell in my off hours. I'm a design mentor here on ADPList, as well as a co-organizer for Ladies That UX Atlanta. What is ADPList? Short for Amazing Design People List. This is a global community for making genuine connections, a platform where people can find, book, and meet mentors from all around the world. And our mission is to foster an inclusive space and support network for designers to come together, to learn from each other, and to strive to be better. So if you haven't had a chance to check our community out, or this is your first time, check out adplist.com after this event. Some of our community milestones that we're super proud of. I just love when these numbers keep ticking up, higher and higher. So now we have over 4,700 mentors on the platform, leading to over 50,000 one-on-one quality sessions. We have hosted over 600 events and have touched over 70 countries. And by the way, a lot of these past events that we've hosted are recorded and available on our YouTube channel, along with other recorded sessions from other wonderful mentors. So do check that out. It's a great resource. Some guidelines, some house rules. So this event will be recorded. We have a handy Pigeonhole link, which we will use for Q&A. So you can all vote on which questions you want our speakers to tackle. So after they present, that'll be what I'm looking at to pick out some questions to ask them. Of course, no hate speech or discriminatory behavior. And as is our tradition for every event that we do, we will do a signature selfie in a moment, and I'll let you know when. And then finally, please share your takeaways on social media by tagging at ADPList and using the hashtag Amazing Together. So let us know what were some of your favorite insights or favorite lessons that you want to share. And then I can, my goodness, last slide. Come on. There we go. Last one, announcements. Two things. So we now have on adplist.org, you can search for mentors that have experience in product research. So for those of you that are mentors as well, you can now add this in your settings page starting today. So that's really exciting. And then we have now a handy feature that will send you a notification when your favorite mentor is back online or available again for booking new sessions. So no need to hit the refresh button on their page. You will be notified when that happens. Okay, now is our signature selfie. I believe Ashope will be pressing the button. Is that right?
Yes, I will. And, everyone, let's have your smiling faces. Please just turn off our cameras. I'll take the picture across the slides. Oh, I can see the nice faces. Nice smile, Mandy, Fabian, VD, I can see you there. And Tara. Okay, so I'll be going through the pages quickly. So please hold your pose, hold that smile for page 1, hold that pose and go. Okay, now I'm going to page 2 and go. Okay, now I'm going to page 3 and go. Now I'm going to page 4 and page 5 and page 6.
Ooh, a lot of pages.
Yeah, lots of pages, lots of people today. Almost done. Page 7 and page 8. And that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. And back to you, Ying.
Yeah. Wow. I think we both broke our page count. And the fun thing is like, all right, which page am I on? So you're just like smiling for a full 2 minutes. Okay. With that done, and we'll be sharing that afterwards on our social media. Let's get into our talk today. So how can some people enjoy listening to critiques or expressing their feedback, right? You can probably relate. You've presented your work, waiting for some feedback. The deadline is right in front of you, and then you receive unexpected criticism. It can be pretty overwhelming and uncomfortable, right? To see your hard work taken apart like that. But as designers, we are no longer working in isolation. Design critiques are a key part of the process that, if harnessed correctly, can encourage collaboration and improve the ideas that we have. So in this event, our speakers, Deanne and Nguyen from Ro and Chukwuemeka Ihionye, or Mecca for short, from Softcom, will explore what it means to give constructive design critique and outline the fundamental principles on how to receive critiques effectively and use them to all of our benefit. And then afterwards, we'll have that Q&A, the AMA with our speaker. So if you have any burning questions, please use the Pigeonhole link to submit them. So let's get started, speakers. Welcome to the stage. I will now hand the mic over to you to let you get started. And everyone, let's give a warm welcome to our speakers.
Oh, thanks, everybody. Okay, cool. I'm just like getting adjusted to Zoom here. Awesome. Thank you for joining our session today. It's awesome to see so many faces on this call today. So the title of the event, Run, Hide, or Learn: The Secrets of Successful Design Feedback. I'm Deanna Nguyen. I am a product designer at Ro. I mostly focus, or my design career has been mostly focused around making healthcare accessible, healthcare in the United States that is accessible. I've had a range of experiences working from large tech companies, doing freelance work, being the first designer at a startup. So having experience all across the board in terms of getting feedback. And then I'll hand it off to Mecca.
Yeah, I'm Chukwuemeka, product designer at Softcom, building a security of products that helps people get access to spaces and offices and homes. I've worked on various products ranging from the fintech industry to consulting firms, and also a lot of products. I've mentored over 7,000 people in the field of UI UX design. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Cool. So we'll jump into it. So I wanted to discuss just general goals for the session. So I think definitely let me know in the chat what you'd also like to have as a goal of the session. But one, we want to provide strategies for holding a productive design critique and review. Also building the right mindset and confidence for receiving feedback, as you know, it can be a touchy subject, especially for something that you've worked hard on. And then also share helpful tips on how you can give feedback and how to pick the right feedback to follow up on. So I really like this quote from Scott Adams, who is a comic artist. He talks about how creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Design is knowing which ones to keep. And part of knowing which pieces of the design you want to keep requires getting feedback. So I feel like this is something that's been said a lot across the tech industry, but it's important to gather feedback early and often. And I'd love to hear in the chat why this is important. What are your thoughts on the phrase in general? Cool. Thanks, Valerie. Saves time and resources. Yes, definitely. Yes. Yeah, awesome. Definitely the first one, executing faster. Yeah. So with gathering feedback early and often, you're shortening the feedback loop for your work, which results in you getting to a good outcome faster. I understand it's really hard for junior designers to feel confident asking for feedback, especially when you're in an ambiguous space and you don't want to come off as if you don't know what you're doing. So you get stuck in like this decision paralysis of what should I do next? But really everyone, asking questions to people is really the best way to get insight. And I like the phrase, it's, action creates clarity, creates confidence. So taking action to review your work will help create that confidence and clarity. Yeah, more reviews lead to faster improvements, more effective products. Yep. Second, the more you ask for feedback, the more productive that feedback will be. Asking earlier gets feedback on the logic and strategy of your work and process. Asking for feedback too late can just narrow in on finishing touches and tweaking details rather than the meat of what you're trying to do. Getting feedback earlier also helps you refine your work. Sharing your process opens the floor for suggestions on improvement on how you work and how you think about problem solving. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rebecca says I'm a feedback addict. I always get scared. I'm looking in the wrong direction. I totally feel that. Want to catch that early. Cool. A third part of gathering feedback is building trust. So it's a great way to build trust with your peers if you're checking in with them more often. And part of that is also that you share learnings with everybody. When you get a lot of people in the room asking questions, people learn from each other because not everybody has all the context. And I would argue that part of a designer's role is crafting spaces for productive conversations. Sometimes a designer has the bird's eye view of everything that's going on, and people may be in silos, and you're kind of that person to bring it all together. Cool. All right, I'll hand it off to Mecca for this next part.
Thank you, Diana. So, a quick audience checking. What are some of the common challenges that you face when you're gathering feedback and also giving design feedback? You can also drop on the chat. Also, how do you feel about receiving feedback? As you're dropping it, I would like to talk a little about design critics and what they are. So a design critic can also be referred to as design review. It should be a positive event that should feel good for all parties. So it is any scheduled time for gathering feedback on your work. And as the saying goes, 2 brains are better than 1, or in this case, 2 or more brains. So it's always better to gather this feedback, to gather these reviews, so that you can know whether you are going in the right direction, whether you should switch directions, or you can modify and make your work better. So also, another important thing about crafting constructive design critiques is that it should be cross-functional. So let's consider what we will do before the critic. Now, the first point you're going to consider is where we are in the process. So the question should be, are you in the discovery process? Are you in the ideation process? Are you providing, is it the solution providing process? You should know where you are, because this will help you to understand what feedback you need, the actual feedback that you need to move forward. So understanding this can also help you. It's also important to communicate to stakeholders where you are, so that they can know how they can come in with their feedback. So it's not more like I want to have a feedback on everything. You should also be specific. So the next one is, what are your goals and desired outcomes? So what do you want to get out of this design critique? What should you be able to do next as a result of this critique? So you should be explicit. You should know exactly what your goals are, what you aim to get out from it. Also, you should communicate this at the beginning of the critique. So this helps the whole group to know the area of focus. So it's at the beginning, you already know what you are trying to get out, and it will help you a lot doing this when you are forming this critique. Also, another important, if not the most important, is who needs to be involved. So for the design critique, it's as well as who is involved in the process, because how big should the group be? Whose opinion are the most important to move forward at that particular stage? Remember, you've already found the process in which you're trying to get your critique. So who is important for that stage that you are in? Are you looking for feedback or buy-in from stakeholders, or you want approval? It also helps when you are developing a Rakai model, which is a responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed model. So you need to understand who is to be involved for you to make certain decisions. Your goals for what kind of feedback you want has to be matched with the needs. What you want, the kind of feedback you want with the need that will help you determine the kind of people that will be in the room. So also, you should try as much as possible when it's good to have while it's good to have a large design review, it's also good to bring those who their opinion are really needed. If not, if you are just looking to inform and collect feedback in large quantities, then large design reviews are okay and fine. Now, the next one that you should consider before the critique is what type of feedback is productive. So not all type of feedback is productive. Some are even counterproductive. So we should write down what questions that must be answered if there's any. So for us to going into the design critique, we have to have this in mind. This is a question that when we answer, we know that it is we are getting somewhere. So we should think through how broad or specific we want people to be in their feedback. So it's not just about giving feedback, it's about being specific about what we want and how we want it. You may focus on particular sections. You can say how is the process, you can talk about the process, you can talk about the information architecture. You do want to get feedback on the user experience. What about the visuals? Or whether it is actually feasible. So this can also come from getting feedback from the engineering team, from the and also different parts of the team, the business analyst team. And we should always match design fidelity with the type of feedback we are looking for. So depending on what you are looking for, that's how we're going to match design. So this is actually what we should be thinking of before our critique. So I'll hand over to Lena to continue.
Awesome. Thanks for the in-depth overview. So now that you've kind of set up the goals and the pre-work of your critique, now what are you doing during the critique? So first, framing the problem. This is probably like the hardest thing to do, providing enough context, but not taking up too much time. And I think honestly, this is just like a skill that every designer is always practicing. I noticed like even in interviews, it's really important to know how to frame your problem succinctly for the people who are your audience. Explaining where you are in the process. So similar to what Mecca said earlier, if you explain to people where you are in the process, they'll understand the type of feedback that you are looking for. And then, similarly, in parallel with what you've prepared, communicating your goals from the critique. And then suggesting the types of feedback you'd like, and then walking through the process and designs. So I know this is kind of like a repeat of the last one, but it's really important to communicate all of this context before you jump into things, because if people are not aligned from the beginning as to where you're trying to go, they're going to take you in a different direction. So always know your point A and what your point B is, make it explicit so you don't get veered off into point C. Any questions there? Cool. Awesome. So yeah, and during the critique, I saw this was a question earlier of getting help with note-taking. I usually ask another designer on the team to help me take notes, whether it's in Figma or it's just like on a document separately. And sometimes I will also like volunteer to take notes for my counterparts just to like help them out because they're trying to manage and facilitate a conversation. And then also it's just like hard to type down things word for word. How much detail do you go into when it comes to process? I think that depends on the audience. So when I am sharing with product managers or product leaders, I often start with kind of like what the problem is, core user that it's affecting, and if you have data on like the reach the potential impact, or like how confident you know this problem, how confident you are in that this is an actual problem, communicating all those data points. And then jumping into, the user you want to solve for, and then any design principles or product principles that have been defined for the feature. And that's important because principles kind of set a direction, so people kind of know, why your decisions are being made. Like if you want to prioritize speed over comprehension or something, or comprehension over speed, you might add more screens, and they may realize like, oh, you're trying to optimize for comprehension, not just getting someone through a flow faster. And then I think with engineering, I think the process of I think they're more interested in technical feasibility. Obviously, setting up and framing the problem is important to build empathy, but it's also, for engineering, I tend to talk more about the design system, patterns that are already existing and why we're reusing them, showing examples of how they've been used and where they can pull them from, and then getting feedback on like, is the data moving in a way that works? And sharing the process for how I expect data or information to be moving across our systems. Cool. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the next slide. I see there's a lot of questions. Hopefully we'll get to them at the end. So after the critique, it's really important to follow up with just everything that's been discussed. So first, create opportunities for asynchronous feedback. Sometimes in a large group or even like a medium-sized group, not everyone feels empowered to speak up, or some people just need more time to digest information before they can make a solid call on it. So sometimes it actually helps to like send out a pre-read before you go into the review, but of course people sometimes don't have time, so they don't have time to read it. So you want to make space at the beginning and end of a critique, and make sure that the avenues for feedback make sense. Like, is it email? Email is great for like more formal feedback. You can use Figma, you can use Slack. Slack is great for quick feedback, but it can get lost. So you need to make sure you translate that somewhere else. Sending a follow-up of summary decisions and action items. Obviously, it can be hard if you're just getting quick feedback to send a summary, but if it's a more formal design review, sending up a summary of decisions helps keep a paper trail. So when new people are joining the project, they don't have to question why certain decisions were being made. And then also action items keeps people accountable for the open questions that need to be answered. Asking for feedback about the session. So this is really important to ask feedback about how you did for your own career goals, but then also for improving, continuous improvement. And some questions that I like to ask are, like, how well did I set up context and expectations? What could have made them clearer? Or like a good catch-all is like, how could this have gone twice as well? Cool. All right. With that, I'll pass it back to Mecca.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. So the question is, what are the best practices to collecting or having design critiques? Just a quick audience check-in. What are strategies that have worked for you, if you don't mind sharing, when receiving feedback? What are some of the strategies that have worked for you? We'd like to know in the chat. Okay, so while that is coming, we're going to discuss some of the best practices for receiving feedback. One of the first one is understanding everyone's role. So this is very important because everyone in the room or everyone that you're expecting feedback from is not at the same level. Their feedback is not at the same level. So the question is, are they an executive, an engineer, an external stakeholder? What are they accountable for the project? Are there people that you need their approval or buy-in? Or are there people that you just need to keep on the loop while you are making your decisions? So this is very, very important to understand what everyone does at each particular point in time when you are asking for feedback or receiving feedback. So this will help you to know the right feedback to get. Now, another one is getting to the why. So you need to get to understand why you need those feedback and why they left the feedback for you. So you need to understand exactly the reasons why those feedbacks are given. And so it's not like this needs to change and you say, oh yeah, let's change it. You have to understand the exact mindset behind making those changes or making those adjustments. So when you understand that, you can make a better informed decision. So that is very, very important. You can ask what are the reasons why they made it, what data do they have to make such feedback. So when we understand that, you can put everything into context and we can make better decisions. We should also respect all feedback. I think this is the most important part, because everyone will like to get their voice heard. Everyone would like their feedback to be used, but unfortunately, not every feedback will be acted upon. And it is still important to acknowledge, communicate clearly that we got this feedback, I got this feedback from you, and this is why it will not be used at the moment. This is the reasons. You provide a clear and rational reasons for your decision. So when next you come for design review, the person can also be happy to join in, and the person won't feel that his or her ideas were left out or is not needed. So we should also be very, very key to do this. It's one of the best practices for receiving feedback. So I will also hand over to Leah to continue.
Well, awesome. Now, best practices for following up on feedback that you've received. So, as Mega said, you can't follow up on all the feedback that's been given you, and make sure that you acknowledge people for the feedback they gave and be able to provide rationale for why you might not have taken it. So beyond that, how do you actually know what feedback to take? So first, prioritize blocking feedback. I like to think about this like, if this feedback, like with this feedback, I'm unable to move forward. So that could be anything from like, oh, a major assumption that you made was actually incorrect, so you actually have to change the course of what you're doing. Engineering blockers that are really difficult to change. It's important to actually dig deeper on why that might be the case and what are the trade-offs between making this design change as it relates to the engineering lift. And that also helps does this feedback expose any blind spots that prevent this project or product from achieving its true goal? And if you're able to quantify it, try to understand how many users will actually be impacted, and how confident are you that these users will be impacted. Second, always communicate key decisions. So especially for bigger decisions that involve multiple teams or have implications on technical feasibility, you need to follow up with stakeholders on your decisions and rationale. And then from there, there's probably going to be, another feedback loop pushing back or agreeing. Another conversation probably will come out of it. And if possible, build this into your process, like make it consistent so that people feel confident in your ability. It builds trust. People who are involved feel accountable because the decisions that are being communicated, they are involved in, so they feel more buy-in into the success of what you're working on. And then lastly, trust your judgment. I know this is really hard to do sometimes. If you think about it, sometimes you are the expert in the experience. And it's hard to believe that sometimes when you have like more senior directors, but if you think about people in leadership, they're not on the ground understanding how things are working day to day. So you have more context there. From a product perspective, sometimes product can be more focused on business outcomes and success metrics. So you need to make sure that you can advocate for the user. So in the end, you are the subject matter expert for this problem that you're trying to solve, and you should trust your judgment given all the inputs you've received. This, of course, will help you execute faster and not feel paralyzed. And, and you can always, as long as you're able to provide rationale for your decisions, that's most important. And if new information comes along and you change your mind, that's totally okay too. And it's important to remember and communicate that design is iterative. So it's not like what you're building today will be set in stone. It's just a matter of like, what's the amount of work that can get you like 80% of the way there as best as you can. Cool. So best practices for giving design feedback. You'll see it's kind of similar to some about sharing too. So it's important when you're giving feedback to someone, especially, more in a one-on-one setting, maybe not in like a group setting, but recap the problem, who they're solving for, and what success looks like to them. So you understand like what they understand as success versus what you might have assumed. So this is important for making sure that you're on the same page as them before you start giving them feedback that actually might not even be related to what they're trying to do or accomplish. Second, similar to prioritizing blocking feedback, prioritize the feedback you're going to share. This is important, especially if you are in like a meeting context, like you have limited time. It's important to get out the most important pieces of information and then maybe leave the rest for asynchronous. And then lastly, be specific and explain your why. A lot of times, everyone just has a lot of different contexts across the team, and this is an opportunity to share context and rationale. So don't just, this term that I find funny is like swoop and poop. So don't just like come in, poop on their design and then leave without telling them why. So that's really important and also helps you build trust. And then lastly, offer to look at future iterations, show that you can be a good partner to them, be a valuable member of their team, and then also it helps them feel more confident in sharing their work with you later on, and then that helps build better products. Awesome. Would love to hear best practices or strategies that have worked for you all when giving feedback in chat. But outside of that, that is what concludes our presentation, and we're opening it up for questions and feedback.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting what was interesting that Ruth also mentioned, encourage them to remember it's not about them, but about the business of the user. So this is actually where most designers maybe forget that the feedback they are getting is not about them, but about their work and also the users. So this can also go a long way to shaping our minds to receiving feedback better.
I definitely agree with that too. It's always like a active, effort to like leave ego and kind of emotion aside and really align on that shared business or like team goal. And in terms of questions, we definitely have a bunch. So I'm gonna quickly get started here so we can get to as much as we can. This one got the most votes. So this one is, in my experience, too much feedback can slow down the design process, especially if stakeholders have different opinions about it. How do you gather feedback early and often without slowing down, without losing that momentum?
Yeah, I can share it, I think. It's all about feedback process, I think. So in order to not have to slow down, it means you have to have a set process for how you go about getting feedback and making sure that that's communicated to your team. So for example, like maybe if you're getting a lot of feedback from different types of functions, having a separate process for each of those functions. If it's from leadership, maybe take it all through email so it's all in one place. And like leadership feedback is probably more high level, so you can kind of time box that for yourself to review at a different time. But engineering feedback, maybe it's easier to have them do it in Figma because they can call out and pinpoint exactly where the problems lie. And yeah, so I think it's like really making sure that you show your designs to the right people at the right time, and then set up a system for gathering that feedback. So every time you do it, you don't have to keep setting things up and redoing things. Hopefully that answers the question.
And also to add to that, I think having a record of feedback that you've gotten in the past will also help, because it's easier to for someone to say one thing today and to come tomorrow to say another thing. So when you have a track record of the feedback you've gotten in the past and why those feedback was made then, you can easily say, oh, this is why you cannot be going back and forth. This is what we've decided on, and this is what we're working on. So it will also help to regulate those back and forth that we normally have when we feedback.
I love that. Yeah, that both of you are kind of echoing the same sentiment of creating established processes, essentially templatizing that process so it takes effort off. And then that process, which includes documentation, record keeping, will help you from going back and forth and having like kind of forgetting the key decisions that you make one week and it pivots the other. You can always pull it back again and say, like, we aligned on this. So let's think critically of like why we want to pivot from that, because it takes time and energy. So I definitely agree. Like, it holds everybody accountable as well. So I love that you shared that. Okay, the next question we have is, how can we encourage team and stakeholders to give more constructive feedback based on data, real behavior, and less only on thoughts and personal opinions?
Okay, so actually this is a little bit difficult because most people give feedback based on their own bias. So I think encouraging them, how you can easily encourage them is to show them data. When you show them with data, they can easily make informed decisions, give informed feedback. But when you just allow them to, when you're asking for feedback on an empty blank, let's say canvas, you just want someone to start giving you feedback without pointing them to a specific direction and giving them options. When you allow someone to give feedback based on the entirety of everything they're doing, you find them wandering from different places, from one place to another, without giving real data feedback based on data. So it's better to give them the findings, show them the findings, show them the options that you had to, and why you had to choose certain things. It will help them to make more informed decision and understand the impact of any feedback that they're given on the product.
Yeah, I think, definitely resonates with me. I think another thing is it honestly takes training. Like, everybody should be trained to give better feedback. And it's something like, as a designer, is also part of your role, I think. And I think how you can train people is like by asking really pointed questions when asking for feedback. Sometimes when you leave it too open-ended, people just say like whatever comes to mind rather than thinking deeply about it. And if someone does ask you or gives you feedback on thoughts or personal opinions, you can just like kind of put the spotlight on them and like keep poking to get deeper, kind of like a user interview. Just keep asking why, or like questioning the assumptions that they're making or the context that they might have. Just be like, oh, like, do you have data or insights into why that might be? I'm not like aware of that part of the business. So that helps. And I think hopefully this will be mitigated when you set up the context at the beginning. Like, I am looking specifically for feedback on like whether, this is technically feasible or not. And giving a sense of like where you are in the discovery phase. So hopefully it's mitigated by that at the beginning, but totally, it's hard to manage that. And sometimes if it's like truly out of left field thoughts or personal opinion, it's okay. Just be like, oh, I hear you. And then just acknowledge it and then let it go.
Yeah, love that. It really gives you opportunity to kind of be flexible and adaptive on the spot. There's so much that you can do to, as you said, prep and provide context at the very beginning, but there's going to be some stray things or people don't listen to instructions. So, I mean, it's a great opportunity to navigate that, as you said, with like additional questions or kind of essentially saying like, all right, I'll put that for later and not really. But yeah, and that kind of actually goes into our next question, which is, let's see, Oh, so it's a bit of a story time. Can you give us some real life examples of how you navigated some super critical feedback in your past?
Yeah, I can take this one. I'm like, oh, which story do I want to tell?
It's a good
one. Gosh. Yeah, I think generally my approach for navigating critical feedback is first understanding who's giving me the feedback and what their incentives are. Like, I've had engineers who like gave me critical feedback because they just didn't want to build the thing. I've had like executives who just like did the swoop and poop, you know, and you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt because they're so high level, like they don't know everything that's going on. And part of that is just like being like, I hear you, here's how we'll approach it or explore it. But I'm trying to think of like a specific example. One that came out like really that stands out to me a lot because it made me cry. I was just like so upset.
Oh, no.
But yeah, it's fine. It happens. But there was this engineer. So I was the first designer at a startup for a bit. And so I was like very strapped for resources and what I could do. And I did a very quick usability test with 4 users on this like onboarding flow. And this engineer was just like, you know, just disagreeing with me like left and right, like I don't think we should do it this way, I think we should do it that way. And I was like, you know, based on the 4 users research or like the feedback I got, like this mental model makes more sense. And he was like, you know, that's just 4 users, like does that even matter that it was just 4 users? It seems kind of like too small of a sample size. And I think I was just like feeling very heated because I am the only designer and I only have so much time to like make a decision quickly. So how I approached that was, you know, one, first recognizing like where he's coming from. Since we were a very small startup at the time, he was very used to making design decisions because they didn't have a designer prior to me joining. So I understand now that it's like, oh, okay, he's used to like making the call on these things and it's not malicious or anything like that. And then secondly, understanding what he has on his plate and his goals. So I think like he was also pretty strapped for time and wanting to simplify the design so that it wouldn't be so complicated to build. So from understanding that, I then kind of like followed up with like articles. There's a Nielsen and Norman group article around how 4 to 5 users is really all you need to have like a solid and sound usability test. Because after that, it kind of is just the same thing and noise. Outside of like pulling up articles, I think making sure that you establish like the relationship that you have with your counterpart, being like, you know, this is my area of ownership. And, you know, if you have feedback, I will definitely take it into account, and making them feel heard and seen, but then still feeling empowered to make your own decisions. So after that, I kind of like, you know, backtrack like, oh, like I want to make sure we understand our working relationship here. Because I think he was very used to making design decisions without consulting a designer. And it's like, okay, I'm an expert in this, so trust my subject matter expertise. So in the end, it actually, like, he was one of my favorite engineers to work with after that. But yeah, it's really important to understand where the other person is coming from and what their goals are. Yeah, long-winded story, but I'll pass it to Mecca if you have a story.
So mine is quite different. That when you ask for feedback and you don't really get the required feedback, especially from, let's say, engineers, let me use engineers for example, and you're getting the feedback from the implementation. So you design something and they did your testing, have your results, and when it goes to implementation, you'll be seeing things that are different and which the engineers feel will be better for the users, which is different from what the users actually want. And it brings a lot of what would I say, altercations between the design and the engineering team, trying to find the middle ground. And this comes in how this was handled. I think how we handled it was I had to speak with the engineers, try to understand why they were making certain decisions during implementation and what their thought process was, because I understood that if I don't understand what they are going through, why they were making such decisions. I cannot try to help them or find a middle ground for us to make compromises. So also looping in the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, the product manager, and every other person that needed to be there. It's also helped to align the key objectives of the product and also of the users, and tying it in with the business goals and how that affected the product as a whole. So this can also help because most times it's easier for us to go on, help them to antagonize the engineers or those who are giving us certain kind of feedback, and not trying to understand actually where they are coming from and what they are feeling, and why they are making those decisions. So when we try to empathize with them, which is what designers always talk about, empathy, but it's in the real sense it's quite difficult, especially when we are on the other side receiving those feedback. So yeah, that's a short one from me.
Yeah, no, that's great. There's definitely that same theme or through line of like, okay, let's pause and then extend that olive branch, or like, let me make the first move and understand and confirm my understanding of where that person stands or what their priorities are, what their current context is, and maybe like remove any type of assumptions before kind of moving forward on either standing your ground or seeing if there's opportunities to make compromises. I think that's always kind of the first thing anyone wants, is at least be acknowledged, and then they're open to new ideas or going along with your recommendation, as long as they feel acknowledged and heard in the first time. Nice. Let's see. Ooh, okay. Can you, another question here, can you give us some methods of how we can properly defend our designs, especially if there isn't enough research to support the design through percentages, I guess? Or like, so how can you defend your designs if there may not be enough research or data backing it initially?
Okay, so I think this is quite tricky and a little bit difficult. If you don't have enough data backing your design decisions, to be difficult to defend why you're making such design decisions, because decisions are always based on why. So if you can't answer your why, it opens you up for different attack, so to say. So someone can easily tell you to change a particular thing, but research mustn't be gotten from let's say a very wide variety of users, depending on your budgets, depending on where you're working on. Do you have large pockets to fund a certain kind of research? You can always do other kind of research, try to find out what is working, what is being used in a particular field that you're designing for, and what the majority of your competitors are using and how they're using it, and what your users are that are using maybe similar kind of products how they are using a particular product, and things that are in those products that they love. So you can use those data to back up your own decisions, and also trying to do tests on those products can also give you the data that you need, even though you may not have that much budget to work on. But doing a few tests among particular people, and also at the end, having data is important. So you have to find a way to get those data, even though it may not be the regular process due to constraints that you may have.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of methods that I can think of. One, I really like using design principles in these situations because it's rooted in, like, design principles are rooted in things that have been repeated in the design world and work. So when you're communicating your design, if you might not have like solid research, you can always pull on the work that's been done by like tons of other designers and create principles. So that's why setting them up at the beginning helps set the framework for the decisions that you make. And then when people, you know, have questions about it, you can be like, oh, these are like the 3 principles that we define for the project. And make sure that you're not the only one defining the principles, like define them with your product partner, with your engineering partner, because that creates like a team alignment. And then they can also help you defend your decisions with whatever context that they might have. I'm thinking more of like a consumer product, but if you can't like get out there and like actually interview people, sometimes it helps to try to understand like how the way that you're building this actually helps the business. Hopefully you can get some insight there. If not, your product manager should know, like, how does this lower like support calls or lower tickets that are coming in? How is it helping save money for the company? That's another good way to frame it if you don't have user research. And sometimes I like, especially when I didn't have that many resources, I was just like going on Reddit, trying to find like people's comments or like articles that people have written. So a little bit more guerrilla research, but that also helps. Yeah, I feel like a lot of designers do like design without that insight. So definitely lean on other people on your team to provide more context for decisions too.
Yeah, I love that. I have to reinvent the wheel, and there's already so many resources out there. So it sounds like the 2 major things I'm hearing are, if you don't happen to have access to users or have user research data to back up your design decisions, is to do that desk research, pull your Nielsen Norman articles and say like, this has been time and time again the recommended design direction to take with this particular feature or workflow. And then as well as like, well, my recommendation also aligns with the overall business goal. And if you can like quantify it in some way, even if I have to guesstimate, like this will reduce sign up times by like 20%, and then we can test it later on. I think that also makes like a strong case. So yeah, there's multiple ways that you can go about making a strong case for your design recommendation. Okay, this one is, do you happen to have any good warm-up exercises for design reviews? At the very beginning, people are trickling in. How do you get them loosened and like thinking about giving very constructive feedback?
Good warm-up exercise for design review. That's a great question. Sometimes our team likes to play like short games together. Like we'll play like Wordle or like one of those word games just to get everyone kind of like in a lighter mood. I'm trying to think. Good warm-up exercise for preparing yourself for a design review, I would say, is just like reviewing with your design teams. Like if you have like a rough idea of how you want to run a design review, running it for feedback with your design team. And then I'm trying to think if there's like another good warm-up exercise. None of them are actually like serious. I think that a lot of them are more on the fun, side. Yeah.
I can. Oh, go ahead.
So I think losing up the atmosphere is great. Breaking the ice, trying to make everyone to understand that and sometimes when you want to get feedback, make those giving you feedback understand that you can't take anything personal. Because sometimes many people may be afraid to hurt your feelings, and depend on what you're actually working on. Because if it's a business, and they won't care about your feelings. But sometimes when you want to get feedback, some of those people may be trying not to hurt your feelings and not give you the good feedback that you need. So you also want to set those backgrounds that they should feel free to give their feedback within these bounds, and trying to explain every other thing, and try to be less official as possible. So because when you are too official, it limits the thinking process, because they feel they are confined in a particular box. So try and make it as much fun, just like Yana mentioned. Make it as much fun as possible. Do things at intervals. Do things that that makes the light in the room, makes everyone laugh. so that everyone will be at ease while giving those. They don't that it's not getting tense. Like you see some feedback that it's as if everyone is quarreling, everyone is changing words. So those things don't help give great feedback.
Yeah, you have a good point too of like, especially when you need them to give you constructive feedback and you're like, I can take it, just whatever thought you have is valid. It can take some time for people to not censor or filter the type of feedback, and it can remove some helpful insights out of that too. So I know for me, whenever I had to, not really for design reviews regularly, but if I have to facilitate like workshops with stakeholders that are maybe new to the type of tool that I'm using, I always try to have some type of like icebreaker thing where it's using the tool. So they're already used to like writing the feedback or typing in the feedback and using the tool. So they can, by the time we start the exercise or maybe do the review, then they're already used to like, okay, I'm familiar with doing this. So yeah, I think it just like, as you said, makes it more casual. And the more you do it as well, and the more that they give you maybe like hard-hitting feedback or like constructive, critical feedback, and you're like, thank you so much. This is more important than the compliments. And I love it. Then the more that you do that, the more they're like, okay, they can take it, or they mean what they say of like, I want some constructive feedback, even if it may like potentially hurt my feelings. Okay, I think we have time for one more before we have to close up the event. Is it better to have feedback / questions during the presentation or review or afterwards, such as like reading the comments in the chat?
Yeah, I think it depends on if you can get help with note-taking. I would say that if, first of all, try to build in times for giving feedback, but be flexible when people are, if they have something that they really need to call out. I think, yeah, it's something that you kind of have to feel, but you should definitely, to prepare for it, like build in feedback, especially around the questions you must have answered. Or if you like really don't, you really want people to save it at the end, set up that expectation. I don't think there is like a best way. I think maybe for a larger group, you might want to be wary of letting people jump in whenever. And I think if people are like kind of veering off track because of a question that was being asked, I think like something I like to say is like, you know, I think there's value in the conversation or like the topic that we're exploring right now, but let's like park it, like write it down somewhere, and then so we can have time to focus on the main objective of what we're here to do. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what kind of feedback you need and who's in the room.
Exactly. I was about to say it depends on who you're getting the feedback from, because sometimes if you wait to the end, most of those people in the room may not write down what they wanted to say. And by the time you finish your presentation, they have forgotten what they wanted to say. So it's important to strike a balance. Just like Diana mentioned, you can set a time for feedback in between your presentation. Is there anyone that has something to say about this particular page I've shared? And what do you think? What are your thoughts? If someone wanted to say something, they can say something. If that thing is off point, or you still come to that, you can tell the person that, we'll come to that and we'll still talk about that, and you note that down somewhere. And that's also important when you have someone that is helping you to take a note, or you can also take the notes by yourself. So this is also very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it sounds like the golden answer that we always have is like, it depends. So I think there's room here for people to experiment and see what type of feedback timing works well for the type of review and the type of audience that they're dealing with too. I know in the past I've done silent reviews in the beginning where I would write the problem statement and the type of feedback that I'm looking for on like FigJam or Miro board. And then I lay out the design flows, and then I set like 10 minutes, and then people have to write their comments. And the benefit of that is that you get to get as much feedback as you can, because it's like people aren't talking over each other. And then you can parse through it afterwards and then like follow up with people and then kind of prioritize it. So there's definitely many different ways that you can get in that feedback. So there's room for some fun experimentation and then figuring out a process that works well for you and your team. Okay, with that, we are unfortunately out of time, but we've been dropping handy links in the chat if you'd like to continue the conversation with Mecca and with Deanna. They are on adplist.org as awesome mentors. Also, like, are there any other places where our audience can find you on in the internet, on social media?
I use LinkedIn mostly. Yeah.
I use LinkedIn and Twitter, so I'll be dropping the links. LinkedIn, Twitter.
There it is. He dropped it. Click it.
I'm like, one minute.
And there's his Twitter. Okay, yeah. I always try to open up and like, we always have our ADPList links for our mentors, but just in case they can connect with you, because you know we have so many great questions, we weren't able to go through them. So if there's if our mentors would like to like review those questions and maybe share on the social media or have like a group session to kind of continue this conversation, that is also an option to look forward to in the future. But with that, I want to first off thank our speaker. So everybody either say thank you or like go crazy in the chat, express gratitude for like sharing their knowledge and all those awesome tips and advice. Like I wanted to show with you, like I wrote so many sticky notes for myself as well as like, oh, I got to remember this. So yeah, thank you to our speakers for sharing their time and their knowledge with us. And hopefully we'll see them in the future as well, where they can share other types of tips and tricks on how to navigate a successful design career. With that, I want to thank everybody for sharing your time with us, whether it's your morning, afternoon, or really late night. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and we'll see you next month for another event. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ying. You're an awesome
Thank
host.
you, everyone. Thank you, Ying.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. Be safe, be happy. We'll see you next time. Organizers and speakers will stick around and do a little retro afterwards before we call it a day. Bye, everyone.